Die! All of you! Die! Ah! Die, heretic! Oblivion take you!
Rip and tear, scourge the Daedra, slaughter the unholy. Oblivion gates have opened all across Tamriel. Doom has come, but not for us. For the Crusader is here. He has recovered the holy relics of Pelennor Whitestrake. He mantles the Star-Made Knight. Destroy, destroy, destroy! Smite ye evildoers! Ah! Reman! Welcome to Fudge Muppet, my name is Scott, and this is the Crusader build for Oblivion Remastered. Time to kill some demons. We are obsessed with the Elder Scrolls here, and all of our builds are optimized for great gameplay, but we love role-playing, and so we create characters with their own motivations and backstory with specifically tailored skills, aesthetics, and gear to try and deliver a truly unique experience, both memorable and distinct from others. There will be timestamps that break up this video into various sections, covering every single facet of the build, including a guide through leveling and gear, what items to get, tips and tricks, all for each respective part of a playthrough, early, mid, and late game, as well as a section dedicated to backstory and role-playing. The Crusader is the ultimate choice for someone who wants to truly embrace the core theme of Oblivion's main story, that is destroying the Daedra and thwarting Mehrunes Dagon, giving the prince a taste of his own destruction. Bearing the holy relics of Pelennor Whitestrake himself, the Star-Made Knight, you lowly mortal will take up the mantle when no one else could. You shall challenge the might of Ayleid lords, fearsome necromancer kings, and the endless ranks of demons that pour forth from the hell that is Oblivion. Start with the most humble of beginnings, seek absolution for your past, and trust in the divines to show you the way. Destiny is awaiting. Let it be known that I listened to Rip and Tear from the Doom soundtrack on repeat while writing this build, but without further ado, let's dive into the depths of character creation and begin our journey as the Crusader. The very first decision we make in the character creation process is race. Each race comes with its own spread of starting attributes, and each has one of two origins to pick from, which offers some more flavor for role-playing and comes with slightly altered stats. For the Crusader, I chose an Imperial with the Colovian background. This choice is largely for role-playing reasons, and there are several alternatives which I'll discuss in a moment, but the starting attributes for the Colovian origin Imperial are 40 Strength, 40 Intelligence, 40 Willpower, 30 Agility, 30 Speed, 40 Endurance, 50 Personality, and 50 Luck. The Nibene Imperial has 40 Speed and 30 Willpower instead, but as a tanky Crusader we can deal with lower speed from the outset and benefit largely from Willpower, which will give us quicker Magicka regen and a larger fatigue pool. For those new to Oblivion Remastered, I'll give a very brief overview of attributes and what they do. Strength affects melee damage, except short swords and daggers, carry weight, and contributes to your base health. Intelligence determines your max Magicka, Willpower determines your Magicka regeneration rate and the larger portion of your maximum fatigue. Agility determines damage for bows, short swords, and daggers. It affects your fatigue regeneration and the smaller portion of your maximum fatigue. Speed is simply how fast you move. Endurance determines the main portion of your max health and how much health you gain on level up. Personality affects NPC disposition, and luck is a niche attribute that affects a variety of things. You don't even have to think about it or invest in it unless you are doing a specific build that takes advantage of it. Imperials start with the highest personality stat in the game, not that this is particularly useful, however the Helm of the Crusader fortifies personality by 25 points, resulting in a 75 personality, which will give us the presence that a heroic Crusader should command. Most people will like us a lot, though in general this is a role-playing motivated decision. I wanted to feel like a hero of the people, a symbol of awe and inspiration. Fortunately though, the Colovian Imperial choice, aside from thematic reasons, provides a largely well-balanced spread of attributes for our needs, with our most important attributes of strength, intelligence, willpower, and endurance all starting out at 40 before we apply bonuses from Birthsign or class. Higher strength is going to help us max our melee damage, provide additional base health, and it will increase our carry weight, which is 100% needed for this character with all this heavy armor and weapons. Higher intelligence will increase our Magicka pool, meaning more divine blessings and holy smiting for us. Willpower's increases to Magicka Magicka regen help that also, plus it largely defines our fatigue pool, meaning we can strike those demons down again and again. And endurance is our health. It's gonna make us an unkillable tank. The Imperial also comes with plus 10 skill boosts to Mercantile, which is helpful to make an early buck, Speechcraft, which is far less useful, and Heavy Armor, which is actually great for our purposes. We also get a plus 5 to Blade, Blunt, and Hand-to-Hand. The Star of the West power is actually pretty decent for the early game when we don't have that high fatigue or restorative methods via magic available. It absorbs 100 points of fatigue on touch once per day, a little come in clutch spell that can be used to help you stay blocking or power attacking. Voice of the Emperor is the other greater power that the Imperial gets, which charms a target for 30 points for 30 seconds, which comes in handy for some quests where you need info without bribing or playing the speech minigame. Also comes in handy when haggling with merchants to sell the plunder from your crusades across Oblivion. With all that said, if you aren't too keen on playing an Imperial, here are some alternative choices for race that you might prefer. Keep in mind that the backstory has been written for a Colovian Imperial, however the role-playing for the most part could still fit pretty well as long as you are a human race. Saying that, I wouldn't recommend going for an elf or beast race at all, not exactly Pelennor approved. First up, if you really don't want to play an Imperial, I would choose Nord. For those who don't know, Imperials have Nordic ancestry tracing back to the days of Alesia. In fact, the Colovians, and at times more broadly, Imperials in general, have been referred to as Syro-Nordics for this reason. So, picking a Nord can be a very good choice from a role-playing perspective also, just as a Nord who grew up in Cyrodiil. Anyways, Nords in Oblivion have 50 strength, 30 intelligence, 30 or 40 willpower depending on Western or Eastern origin, 40 agility, 40 speed, 50 or 40 endurance depending on Western or Eastern origin, along with 30 personality and 50 luck. I'd personally, if picking a Nord for this build, would take the Eastern origin, which comes with more willpower at the cost of endurance. Of course, in the long run both will be maxed, but in the short term the Western Nord origin will suffer more in terms of magic. Also, role-playing note, I'd stick to the same backstory and just kind of hand-wave the idea that you have a Skyrim origin. It's not like it comes up again after character creation anyways. With less role-playing considerations, and by that I mean with less potential ancestral or cultural ties back to Alesia and the days of Pelennor Whitestrake, you could also pick Redguard or Breton. Bretons are definitely the min-max choice with 50 more magicka out the gate and 50% magic resistance. They're always a good choice, but for this build your warrior stats will need a bit of a leg up in the beginning if you choose Breton. Redguard is the opposite, fully maxed in on the warrior stats, instead requiring that magical leg up with attribute investment. At the end of the day, these alternate choices are up to you. I've built this character with the Colovian Imperial in mind, with both statistical and role-playing considerations accounted for, so adjust accordingly if you choose otherwise. As you move through the sewers and again come across the Blades and the Emperor, the most esteemed Uriel Septim VII will give you an astrology reading. Time to pick a birth sign. For the min-maxes out there, the best choices for signs will always be related to some kind of permanent effect like the Atronach, Lord, or Mage signs. However, we here at Fudge Muppet don't always want to base our decisions on some level 30 maximized outcome, but rather attribute boosting signs often allow you to get into the feel of a character much earlier than otherwise possible. So taking that into account, especially for an Imperial that is rather balanced in attribute distribution, I personally chose the Lady birth sign. Thematically, it feels like a good pick. Perhaps the Lady constellation could be symbolic of Alesia's favor shining down on this holy crusader who mantles Pelennor Whitestrake, or in a broader sense, it can give the feel of a Catholic crusader with Mother Mary shining down on him, Stella Maris. Vibes aside, the Lady provides plus 10 to our willpower and endurance stats, which are a hearty boost for our character at the outset, functionally boosting our health, our fatigue, and our magicka regen. Like I said, we really do consider the role-playing angle here, and don't want to be just delivering builds, always Breton, always Lord or Mage sign, skills always Destruction, Heavy Armor, or Alchemy, etc. You get the idea. Here at Fudge Muppet, we like ripping open a fresh can of role-playing and huffing vibes and themes all day long. However, if I were to pick a min-max choice, I'd go for the Lord sign, offering 15 points of armor and 15% magic resistance, which gives us a solid leg up defensively. The armor is equivalent to us wearing an ebony cuirass, even when completely in the nude. Mage sign would also work for our needs. Anyways, I picked the Lady sign, and all the leveling will be for a character that has done so. Race and Birthsign are covered, let's keep moving through the sewers to the pivotal point that begins the Crusaders' quest of vengeance. The Emperor is dead, and now it is time for us to pick a class. Oblivion Remastered has overhauled the leveling system a lot. It is nowhere near as contrived and punishing as it once was. Attribute gains at level up are now simply distributed by you, rather than the value added being determined by skill increases under governed attributes. At level up, you will be presented with 12 virtue points, which are essentially attribute points that you can distribute as you like, but a single stat can only have a maximum of +5, meaning the rest must be distributed elsewhere. Also, a point of luck costs 4 virtue points rather than 1, and you can only add a single point per level. I dumped all that on you now in order to provide context for our class choices. Major skills are skills that level up faster and start higher. Minor skills level slower, but they also contribute to overall level experience, unlike in old Oblivion. Let's build our Crusader class. There is actually a pre-made Crusader class, which is pretty solid if you wanted to pick it for whatever reason, so you can go into the stats menu and see the cool little picture pop up, I guess. But look, let's be real, a custom class is the better choice. Like the pre-made Crusader class, we will pick combat as our specialization, meaning we get +5 to combat skills and they will level at a faster rate. For our favored attributes, we will also choose strength and willpower, meaning each will gain +5. If you wanted to, you could also pick intelligence instead of willpower for a bit more of a magicka boost at the start, but at the same time, we aren't relying on magic all that heavily at the beginning. It's very much a secondary benefit to augment the build with healing and ranged spells, so we can afford to invest more heavily in stats that factor into melee combat, especially since the Clovian Imperial starts with 40 intelligence and 40 willpower. If you had chosen a different race with 30 in those attributes, then I'd rethink the leveling strategy to help them catch up a bit. Anyways, investing in willpower is investing in both magicka regen and maximum fatigue, which are both important for our playstyle. So, as a Clovian Imperial with a lady sign and the favored attributes of strength and willpower, we will have 45 strength, 40 intelligence, 55 willpower, 30 agility, 30 speed, 50 endurance, 50 personality, and 50 luck. This build is not the speediest. The Crusader is a tanky, heavily armored paladin type character with a ton of restoration magic that can keep us in the fight, ripping and tearing at our unholy enemies. Let's talk about the major skills. The pre-made Crusader build matches very closely, but it does make a bit of a waste with 3 melee damage types in my opinion. Having blunt, blade, and hand-to-hand, it's also missing blocks, so we make our own tweaks. We start with a speed of 30 and really don't focus on increasing it until later, so I really like to have athletics in there. Some people have a real gripe with picking certain skills that are easier to level because they say they level you up too fast, but I'm going to be honest, I've not really found this to impact gameplay at all. The concern is that with things like athletics and acrobatics or alchemy sending you up levels, you may get out-leveled damage-wise. This was also a problem in OG Oblivion if they were major skills because of the scaling, but in Remastered, I haven't really found this to be an issue. To clarify, the concern is that if you level up too fast by using skills unrelated to your main damage output, a skill like Marksman, Blade, or Destruction, for example, if you are a character at level 10 with your highest damage skill being 30, then you might have a problem, but 9 times out of 10, you're picking up at least one damage dealing skill, and natural gameplay will ensure it levels up alongside your others. This issue is overstated, at least for the standard difficulty of Adept. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Master difficulty Oblivion builds because it essentially narrows your options to only min-maxed picks if you want to have a good time. Be Breton, Mage or Lord Sign, maybe Atronach, Heavy Armor Block, Blade, Restoration, Destruction, Alchemy, and something else. There you go, have fun. But here at Fudge Muppet, we are far more interested in build variety and unique role-playing experiences, while also optimizing the build within those parameters. So since we've addressed that, know that unless you are doing some master difficulty thing or you have all of your major skills be fast leveling, non-damage ones, you're going to be beyond fine. That is why for the Crusader, athletics is one of our major skills, because with 30 speed and other attribute focuses, we won't be getting around all that fast, and in combat this can make a difference. So yes, I'd like athletics to both start off at apprentice so it regenerates properly while running, and have it level up faster so we can close the distance to our enemies. The next major skill we pick is Armorer, starting us off with an apprentice skill level of 30, meaning we can repair enchanted gear, and by expert we'll be able to improve our armor and weapons beyond their maximum durability for even more protection and damage. The only way to level this is through just repairing stuff yourself. This may also level more slowly for us because of a way we can incidentally cheese repairing our main armor set and weapons, but I'll address that later. The next major skills are Blade and Block, straightforward and easy to understand, more damage and more defense. Blocking at expert level now has shield bashes, which are pretty damn cool and make you look like a mighty crusader just clearing through hordes of demons with heaven's bulwark. It's also worth noting that the damage of your shield bashes scales with your strength and block skill, but the block skill has no benefit over 100, but strength does, so we can use restoration, fortify attribute spells to crank up that shield bash power if we like. We also take the heavy armor major skill, which as an Imperial will start us off with a skill level of 40, only 10 skill increases to the journeyman rank. It's our main form of protection when scamps and clan fears come to try and tear us apart. That covers the combat major skills, but this Crusader is no pure warrior. We wanted to emulate the feeling of a holy warrior with divine blessings and auras to buff ourselves, as well as possessing the magical skills to deliver holy smites. For this reason, we need both restoration and destruction respectively, and both will have fantastic uses. Restoration is going to increase our battle faculties beyond what is natural, a form of divine grace which allows us to increase our attributes and skills through contemplation and focus of magical energies. We want to deliver the feel of a warrior enhanced by his faith in the divines. With restoration, we will be able to not only buff our attributes and skills beyond that which is natural, but also it will allow us to heal ourselves and others, as well as restore our fatigue, which is fantastic for this block and blade intensive character. Persistence is key to winning the battle. Destruction is typically for damage-based spells, and of course this will afford us some ranged capabilities with target flame or shock spells, perhaps reminiscent of Pelennor Whitestrake's description. I quote from the Songs of Pelennor Volume 1, "He was Pelennor the Whitestrake because of his left hand, made of a killing light." All manner of interpretation can be made with Pelennor, and in the other songs he is said to have had magical capabilities. All that is to say, I think thematically it is awesome to have the Crusader be able to smite his enemies with holy fire. More importantly, the Destruction School also has spells which can cause weakness to fire and weakness to magic, so we can actually stack these onto a basic damage spell, and therefore they enhance the effectiveness of our Sword of the Crusader, which does fire damage when we hit them. There are also some other really cool possibilities here, but I'll get onto that later on. Sometimes in these builds I would like to address minor skills. In a conventional sense, minor skills are anything that are not major skills. However, for our purposes, what I am referring to as minor skills are the other skills of focus that are not a part of your major skills, or rather in this case, they could instead be swapped out. For this build in particular, it's more of the latter situation. Firstly, you can actually run this build with light armor instead of heavy armor if you like, because the Crusader Relics of the Knights of the Nine questline have two different versions depending on which of your armor skills is higher. So if you instead wanted the light armor version, you could pick light armor as a major skill instead, and as long as it is higher than your heavy armor skill, you will get light armor versions of the relics. Naturally, they weigh less and protect less. Up to you if you want to do that, I did not. The other thing that can potentially be either swapped out with blade or just focused on as a minor skill is blunt. The Crusader Relics set comes with both the sword and the mace of the Crusader, and they both look epic, so if you wanted to, you could swap out the blade for blunt and be a mace-focused Crusader, or rather you can just train blunt as an alternative skill so you can swap between both. And personally, I think that's a good idea because they're both enchanted, and so when one runs out you can swap to the other and keep the demon killing spree up. It's also worth noting that restoration can prove invaluable here, especially if you decide to pick up blunt later on. You can create a restoration spell called Skull Crusher or Blunt Focus, which fortifies the blunt skill by 30 to 50 points, and that will, for the duration of the spell, artificially take your low blunt skill and make it much higher, suitable for the enemies currently leveled to you. Restoration has many amazing tips and tricks, but I can address those in later sections when we get to the spell making. But for now, it's time to get out of the Imperial City sewers and pursue our destiny as the Crusader. When we first pop out of the sewers, we can of course go to Vilverin and get our first taste of real combat with our build, clearing out the bandits and vile undead, plundering the ruins. And in the backstory and role-playing sections, more of the decisions we will make will have more clarity, but for now I want to stick to the gameplay motivations. Firstly, we will take the Emperor's request with some sense of urgency and return the Amulet of Kings to Joffrey. Here we can ask for some assistance, and we will get access to a chest full of goods to wear and sell, allowing us to have a proper iron cuirass, greaves, and boots. I also used a steel claymore for this beginning part of the game, though I probably should have just stuck with a sword and shield. And be sure to speak to Prior Maberil and he will give you his horse. We are now kitted out and we can take this horse to the stables at the Imperial City and get it kitted out with some steel armor for free, at least this time. Like I've mentioned, our character isn't the fastest, and so a horse can be really useful for traveling. Also, while still in the vicinity of the Imperial City, you should head down to the waterfront, cross the water to this tower stone, and wait until night and activate it. This has several uses. It gives you 2 spells which can be used once a day. The Master's Hand, which fortifies your armor skill by 20 points on self for 120 seconds, which is handy to use just before you go about repairing all of your gear. And it gives you the Warden Key spell, which allows you to open a hard lock once a day. These are handy perks for our character, but another hidden benefit is that by gaining these powers, the Fortify skill of the Master's Hand counts as knowing a Fortify skill spell, meaning that when we go to do spell making, we already know the Fortify skill effect, though that will come in handy later. But for now, the Crusader is not quite yet so, and therefore we will begin our journey in Anvil. From both a role-playing and gameplay perspective, it is here that we will join up with some lawful guilds, both the Mages Guild and the Fighters Guild. We need to make some money and we want to turn our life around, especially since we've been given a second chance. The practical side of this is of course gold, but it also gives us a chance to get some experience and access to spells and training. Also, it is here in Anvil that we will hear about the chapel attack, and this is where we can first encounter the Prophet. But just before I get carried away with the Knights of the Nine stuff, let me outline the leveling for these early game stages of 1 to 10. At levels 2, 3, and 4, you'll want to invest plus 5 points into strength and willpower, with the remainder 2 points in speed. At level 4, your willpower will be 70, so I think for level 5, I'd instead start bringing up endurance as well as strength with plus 5 into each, and still with the plus 2 into speed. At level 6, that final plus 2 speed will bring it to 40, which we can then leave for a while. Our levels 6 through 10 will then be plus 5 stat increases to strength and endurance or willpower, with the remainder plus 2 going into intelligence. Choosing between willpower or endurance will largely depend on how well you are doing in combat. Personally, I chose to invest in endurance for levels 5, 6, 7, and 8, bringing it to its total of 70, and then I began investing in willpower again for levels 9 and 10. So, just to make it clearer, the stats I had for our Crusader build at level 10 were 90 strength, 48 intelligence, 80 willpower, 30 agility, 40 speed, 70 endurance, 50 personality boosted to 75 because of the helm, and 50 luck. As long as you end up with stats around about that, you should be good. Strength is our highest priority. We will always invest in that until it is 100. Of course, you can, if you prefer, make your own adjustments with more balanced plus 4 investments into multiple things, or however you prefer to split it. I like my clean plus 5s. In the backstory, our Crusader is brash and boastful, but after his time in prison, he has been humbled and seeks to turn his life around. The Prophet will give you a quest. You must first make a pilgrimage to the shrines of the divines and prove your worth to the gods. The best part about starting in Anvil is that you can initiate these quests all at the same time, and you can travel around to the different cities of Cyrodiil in the early game, and if you time it right, you can often be doing a Fighters Guild quest and a Mages Guild recommendation in each city, and looking around nearby for one of the shrines for the pilgrimage. You may also come upon Kvatch in this traveling, and if so, you should fight the Daedra, rescue Martin, and return him to safety. I'll discuss more of the role-playing implications in the next sections, but for now I want to stick closer to the gameplay considerations. Through the main quest, you can get access to Cloudruler Temple, and here you will be able to get a full set of Blades armor, along with a shield and an Akaviri katana. This is a solid early game set that will be useful until we acquire the Crusader's Relics. Speaking of which, if anything, I would prioritize the pilgrimage quest and receive a vision where you are led to find the Helm of the Crusader, and this is where you can begin your questing for the relics. At the Priory of the Nine, you will undergo challenges of strength and eventually be bestowed with a cuirass of the Crusader. You are now beginning to look the part. Umaril has returned to this world, and it falls upon your shoulders to thwart this evil. Without spoiling all too much, you are to continue questing for the relics of Pelennor Whitestrake himself, and this is of utmost importance to our character. We want to get the relics as soon as possible so we can look the part of the Crusader. Now, the relics of the Crusader are leveled, meaning that their armor rating and enchantments are scaled to our level. Traditionally, this would be a worrisome thing, the concern being that they will be locked to early level statistics. However, there is a wondrous thing here in the Priory of the Nine. At the stand that held the cuirass, we can actually place all the relics here, and they essentially respawn, fully repaired, recharged, and leveled to where you are at currently. Meaning, if you first acquired the set at level 6 or before, at level 7 you can place the relics on the stand, take it back, and then you have the higher level set. Therefore, there are no worries to be had about when you get this set, meaning as soon as possible is ideal for this build. For reference, the level ranges are 1 to 6 for the first version, then level 7 to 10, followed by 11 to 15, 16 to 20, and then finally at level 21 and beyond, you will have the best version of the Crusader's relics, which armor rating wise are on par with a set of Daedric. While speaking of the relics, let me go over the enchantments of each. Of course, the magnitude is dependent on the current level of the set. The boots fortify restoration up to 6 points at the highest level, and they also, as they were made by Kinnereth, bestow upon you the ability Woodland Grace, which essentially makes wild animals non-hostile, meaning things like wolves, bears, boars, and mountain lions won't attack you anymore. They will still attack your horse though. The cuirass of the Crusader at its highest level will fortify health by 27 points, restoration by 6 points, and will give you 15% resistance to normal weapons, which is consistent for each leveled version. This means you're only taking 85% damage from unenchanted arrows and weapon strikes. The gauntlets of the Crusader fortify restoration by 9 points at max level and resist disease by 50%. The greaves fortify restoration by 6 points and destruction by 9 points at max level. The helmet always fortifies personality by 25 points and boosts restoration by 6 at max. The shield of the Crusader at max level has a 18% chance to reflect spells. The mace of the Crusader at max level does 14 points of fire damage for 2 seconds and turns undead up to level 17 for 5 seconds, but the sword of the Crusader, which is what I mainly used, does 14 fire damage for 2 seconds and damages magicka by 40 points at max level, which is really nice for putting a stop to those annoying mages and necromancers. A pro tip that I kind of forgot about in my playthrough: get the gauntlets of the Crusader last, or as late as possible. I did not, and it makes combat a lot more painful. The reason for this is that part of the quest for the gauntlets requires you to take a curse upon yourself. You will have a permanent drain fatigue of 5, meaning that you have what is essentially an unhealable fatigue damage of 5. For the most part, you would imagine that this is negligible. However, if you have a fatigue that drops below 0 in Oblivion, not to 0, but below, then you fall over. Normally, when our fatigue reaches 0, it's fine, but with this curse, we have a permanent -5 fatigue drain, meaning that when we hit 0, we're actually hitting -5, which means we fall over. And this can happen quite a bit with our playstyle of extensive blocking and power attacking and such. So if you wait as late as you can to get the gauntlets of the Crusader, we can then progress the Knights of the Nine questline, and soon after, we will be given the Blessing of Talos, which will then rid us of the curse, meaning we won't have that annoying -5 fatigue drain anymore. So, if you want to have a better time, get the gauntlets as late as possible. Anyways, you should be able to get all the relics of the Crusader before level 10, which I would highly recommend as it is core to the aesthetic and role-playing of this character. Also, the boosts to restoration are really handy, and they will be redundant later on. With all the relics equipped with the level 7 to 10 version of the relics, which is the early game, you will have a boost of 18 points to your restoration skill, which is a fantastic boost and especially great for training our restoration. Speaking of which, restoration is a core skill for the Crusader for twofold reasons. Firstly, it has the practical benefits of restore health and fatigue, allowing Divine Fervor to keep us in the fight, but it also allows us to boost our own skills and attributes, which is fantastic, even for the purposes of training restoration. You see, spells that cost more magicka also contribute more to the skill experience. So we can cast spells like Fortify Magicka, which can be bought at Edgar's discount discount spells in the Imperial City Market District, and Fortify Intelligence, which can be easily bought from Orellenway at the Mystic Emporium in the Imperial City Market District. Both of these spells can be used to boost our available magicka pool, as the intelligence attribute essentially translates to more magicka, and this is super handy when training with spellmaking. Before I delve into that, I would by this point really want to have done all the Mages Guild recommendations so that we can get access to the Arcane University and its spellmaking altar. You can of course do the whole Frostcrag Tower thing if you wanted to earlier on, but it's not really on theme for this character. Anyways, go to the spellmaking altar and focus on making different spells with Fortify Magicka, Fortify Restoration, and Fortify Intelligence. And you can variously use different combinations of these to temporarily boost your magicka, and in the process of this, you'll be able to increase your restoration skill vastly, casting spells that you literally don't have the magicka for unless you cast several prerequisite spells of Fortify Magicka, Intelligence, and Restoration. These combinations will allow you to level Restoration to 100 pretty quickly, and this then provides us some great benefits. I would often create spells to then bolster my core combat capabilities. For example, I had a sword focus spell which increased my blade skill by 30 for 30 seconds, which helps damage output before blade is at those high levels, or something like Contemplate Destruction, which boosts the destruction skill by 30 for 30 seconds, which then allows me to lower the cost of destruction spells to make for easier use, or even more expensive combinations like a spell called Combat Training, which fortifies blade and block by 30 for 60 seconds, and fortifies fatigue by 100 points for 60 seconds. An important consideration is that these fortify skill spells are only really useful in that they increase your skill when it is still below 100. In the later game, when you have these skills at 100, the additional boosts no longer have any benefit, with the exceptions of athletics and acrobatics, which continue to calculate beyond 100. Speaking of which, you can make spells called Haste, which fortify your athletics and speed, which is very useful for getting around and closing gaps in combat. I also created a very useful spell called Persistence, which fortifies fatigue by 100 points for 120 seconds, and restores fatigue by 100 points for 2 seconds, allowing me to stay in the fight without faltering. And of course, healing spells such as the Mara's Embrace spell that I created, which is a simple restore health by 100 points spell. Another handy note, you can use a spell which fortifies Personality and Mercantile by 50 points each, and use it just before you go to sell stuff, and then because of the raised disposition and the artificially higher Mercantile skill, you can haggle for way better prices, which is also helpful to stack coins for all the spellmaking costs. So, funnily enough, this Holy Crusader can get ballin' pretty quick with high restoration skill. Our other magic skill is Destruction, and it's trickier to level as it does require enemy targets, for the most part, unless you want to self-immolate or disintegrate your own armor, but like I said, restoration spells that boost the Destruction skill will keep costs down, and therefore allow us to cast more often, which means more experience. In general, I use targeted fire spells that do a bit of fire damage, but also just largely apply weakness to fire and weakness to magic, which stacks. And then when we hit this target with our Sword of Holy Fire, it really packs a punch. It's using Destruction in a way that supports our main playstyle rather than dominating it, and essentially just becoming a Destruction mage. By the end of the early game, which I consider levels between 1 to 10, you would have been able to retrieve all the Crusader's relics. After doing so, I didn't exactly rush to fight Umaril, and also you will be able to get all of the Mages Guild recommendations done and then access to the spellmaking altar, which is where you can really take your restoration skill close to 100 in no time, then creating a whole host of spells to bolster your combat. Now you truly feel like a Crusader with the full aesthetic and all the spells and blessings of the gods. As I mentioned at the start of this video, we here at Fudge Muppet love role-playing, creating backstories and motivations for a character, as well as certain aesthetic decisions that create a certain gaming experience that is distinct from others. We seek a perfect blend of form and function, meaning cool builds that also play well. We aren't always going to go for builds that are just about min-maxing and being overpowered, though if we can, we'll always try and make them as powerful as possible while maintaining role-playing integrity. But I digress. I thought now that you understand the foundational parts of character creation and the early game leveling, as well as the fundamentals of the build, I figured now would be a good time to talk about role-playing, factions, and backstory, something you can listen to while you get your character through those initial levels. So without further ado, let's get into the backstory, and then after we'll see how this informs the role-playing and quest choices before rolling on to the mid and late game leveling. It was the 417th year of the Third Era, and a young boy named Alaric Movanus, son of a smith, sat in his small Kvatch home, listening to stories of ages long past, told from the lips of his once warrior father. His great father was brimming with glee and wonder as he recounted epics told in the camps during his legion days. He spoke. The white strake cracked to the floor with his mace, and they withdrew, and he said, "Bring me Umaril that called me out." And while mighty in his aspect and wicked, deathless golden Umaril favoured ruin from afar over close combat, and so he tarried in the shadows of the White Tower before coming forth. More soldiers were sent against Pelennor to die, and yet they managed to pierce his armour with axes and arrows, for Umaril had wrought each one by long valiance, which he had been hoarding since his first issue of challenge. The half-elf showed himself, bathed in meridian light, and he listed his bloodline in the Aelidoun, and spoke of his father, a god of another world river, and he took a great delight in the heavy breathing of Pelennor, who had finally bled. The tower rung like a chime, as starlight bounced from all its stone, making it shimmer for miles around. The screeching of diamonds and eagle shrieks echoed the chambers of that place, till the final bout was made at its top. Pelennor was cracked and broken, but full of a divine fervour unrestrained by the limits of flesh. He raged the fury of the heavens and unleashed upon the foul creature. Umaril was laid low, the angel face of his helm dented into an ugliness which made Pelennor laugh, and his unfeathered wings were broken off with sword strokes delivered while Pelennor stood, frothing at the mouth, insulting his ancestry and anyone else that took ship from old Elnafay. The other elvish kings were so angered that they embraced a madness of their own and fell upon him, cutting Pelennor into eighths and taking him to the far corners of Cirid to flee from death and to gloat of their prize. Alaric was enchanted with these stories for all his youth. He often dreamed of Pelennor Whitestrake, who felled foul sorcerer kings of ancient days and cleaved through their demon armies gifted by darker powers. Pelennor was the Star-Made Knight, a glorious hero who felled Umaril the Unfeathered and turned the tides for the rebellion. His heroic sacrifice and previous pogroms were essential in the fight for man's freedom. Naturally, Alaric wanted to be just like him, to join some knightly order, to pursue some higher calling in service to the divines. As a child, he was attentive at the chapel and dutiful to his father, helping in the shop, cleaning and shining, sweeping and dusting. He was happy in his childhood. Though there is often a disenchantment that comes with age, stories become just that, stories. His parents became like shackles, binding him to a life at the forge, always afraid of losing their son. The priest's sermons became a bore, his father's work a chore. He sought greater feats, but not of justice nor glory, nothing so grey and hoary. Instead, Alaric sought women and gold. He would hear naught from the wisdom of the old. Many of his friends had already left Kvatch to join up with the Legion and seek adventure in the provinces. Others sought employ at the Mages Guild. Alaric picked up a thing or two from his friend Catus, a bit of healing, a small flare spell, but he showed no immediate aptitude and so abandoned that brief pursuit of magic. It was in his 20th year that Alaric Mavanus, son of a smith, abandoned his home and his aging parents, whom he would never see again. If he regretted his choices or thought fondly of his home, you would not know it. At first his plan was to head to the Imperial City and join up with the Legion, see the world, make some septums, but he was waylaid. At the Two Sisters Lodge in Skingrad he met a new friend, Riberio. Riberio was a shorter man, silver-tongued and quick with a blade. He had a crew of fixers that were mercenaries of a sort, skirting around the edges of the Fighters Guild trade, undercutting their prices and offering a more flexible handling of affairs. Alaric loved it. He got paid to fight, women loved him, men feared him, and he had a great discount on Surreal wine at the lodge. For 3 years, Alaric rubbed shoulders with the sinful and took pleasure in worldly goods. But Riberio and his little troop got too bold. They took a job for an unsavory woman. They were to strong-arm a merchant. Alaric didn't know what for. He figured it was some debt or something. He didn't really care either, just wanted to get paid. They travelled to the all things alchemical by the southeastern shore of the Romare. Turns out this was about some split business pursuit, husband and wife now in competition. The husband kept the original building and the original suppliers. Alaric didn't care much for the details, but things got heated in the most literal sense. Bodyguards made trouble, a fight broke out, the shop burnt down, and Legion Guard got involved. Those that survived, Alaric included, were arrested and thrown in the Imperial City dungeon on the crimes of assault, vandalism, and murder. Alaric didn't kill anyone that day, but he knew in his heart of hearts that he was complicit. This was a wake-up call that came all too late. What had he done with his life? How far had he fallen? Despite his self-pity and loathing, the gods had greater plans for his destiny. After a single night in prison, the Emperor himself, of all people, happened to be escaping assassination through his very cell. Alaric cannot deny the workings of the gods in his life now. The Emperor foresaw his face in his dreams and entrusted the very Amulet of Kings to his care. He feels unworthy of such noble task, ashamed of who he had become, but alas, he had no choice. He was entrusted with the duty to prevent apocalypse. Alaric will do as instructed and take the Amulet of Kings to Joffrey immediately, and with assistance he will be set up with armor and a horse. He is instructed to go and find Martin, a priest in Kvatch. Alaric even recalls him, though he had long stopped going to the chapel by the time of Brother Martin's tenure. Alaric accepts this charge, but cannot bring himself to return and face his parents, and so in a moment of weakness he rides the Gold Road to its end, to Anvil. In gameplay terms, we're going to fast travel to Anvil and truly begin our journey here. From a role-playing perspective, Kvatch is only going to be destroyed the night before your eventual arrival, so it's not like when Alaric was traveling beyond Kvatch that it was destroyed and burnt to the ground, still smoking. So, as was said in the early game, Alaric is going to be joining up with the Mages Guild and the Fighters Guild, taking on jobs and trying to turn his life around. He tells himself that he did his duty, he took the Amulet of Kings to Joffrey, and he tries to live a simple life of a second chance. He will do a few quests and then encounter the news of the Anvil chapel attack, and he will approach the Prophet.
The Unfeathered has come! During the breaking of gates! His golden wickedness will hold fast against all arms, except those of his ancient foe, the White Strake!
Alaric hears those names and is taken back to the stories of his youth. Pelennor, Whitestrake, Umaril. He cannot ignore the Prophet, and so humbly he listens to what he has to say. After this conversation, Alaric comes to truly realize that between this and the task of the Emperor, he can no longer deem himself unready. The gods have a plan for him, and they are owed atonement. Alaric will take upon himself the quest of pilgrimage, and along his path he will return to Kvatch, charred and burned. He is overcome with grief, his parents, his friends, the faces of his childhood slaughtered in the night. He passed only days ago, and because of his own shame he could not face his city, and because of this he was not there to protect it. His parents, his home, all ashes. And this will inspire within the Crusader holy zeal, hatred for the wicked demons which unleash hell upon the innocent. He will slaughter the Daedra, destroy the Oblivion Gate, and help break the siege of Kvatch. He will rescue Martin and take him to the safety of Cloudruler Temple with Joffrey. The Crusader must accomplish great things, for it is his duty to the gods. After Martin is returned to safety, more than ever the Crusader will want to complete his pilgrimage, seek the Crusader's relics, and smite the foul Umaril, a feat which would make his father smile with pride as he watches from the heavens. But the Crusader's destiny does not end there. Donning the armor of Pelennor Whitestrake himself, Alaric will lead a crusade against Oblivion, destroying the Oblivion Gates left, right, and center, supporting Martin as Pelennor supported Alesia. This is his destiny. From a role-playing perspective, I think this is a fantastic character to truly embrace the main storyline, and not only that, but the Mages Guild questline and the thwarting of Manamako and his necromancers is also perfectly on theme for this divine Crusader. And of course the Fighters Guild questline can also be completed, but core to this character in all of his dealings will be honor, piety, and justice. Do no wrong, join no Thieves Guild or Dark Brotherhood, protect the innocent, and purge evil. It's also worth noting that if you gain an infamy above 1, you will actually not be able to use the Crusader's relics and must complete a pilgrimage for atonement. It goes without saying, in general, you should be turning away from quests that demand sinful behavior. Malicious deeds are not to be taken, which rules out the majority of Daedric quests. However, in the course of the main questline, you will have to acquire a Daedric artifact for sacrifice. One such example could be Azura's Star, as Azura's quest requires what is essentially a mercy killing of her followers turned vampires. Or you could get the Ring of Khajiit, which is from Meridia's quest, which essentially requires you you to kill necromancers and undead. Very on theme. Azura's Star is obviously a useful Daedric artifact, and perhaps you may want to get Soul Trap to capture the souls of beasts and monsters to more easily recharge your weapons. However, soul trapping is not exactly on theme for a Divine Crusader. It feels a little perverse for his tastes, but I suppose there's some practicality needed, and you could restrict yourself to Daedra. You can also get your weapons recharged for money, and as I spoke about previously with Fortify Mercantile and Personality spells via Restoration Mastery, you can get flush with cash pretty easy. Also, you can return to the Priory of the Nine, place your equipment on the rack, have a bath I guess, and all that gear will be fully repaired and fully charged once more. The Ring of Khajiit on the other hand is something we will simply never use, so it's very, very easy to just give up. I know that this is something that people will want addressed. Yes, Pelennor was an elf killer, a very crazed mythical elf killer, but in the context of the Empire as it is today, such hatred of the elves doesn't resonate with mainstream Cyrodiilic values. I didn't feel as if it particularly made a lot of sense for this character, who is devoted to fighting evil, all of a sudden include all elves within that purview. Consider even that elves join the Knights of the Nine alongside you. You can do whatever you like with this character, but he is not literally Pelennor Whitestrake. He is his own person of a different time. The role-playing core of this build is very easy to understand. Be a holy crusader with a zealous hatred of evil that is all things undead, murderous, and demonic, aka the foul Daedra who seek to conquer Tamriel. To recap factions, Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, Blades through the main questline, Knights of the Nine, and you could also do smaller factions like the Knights of the White Stallion stuff with Mazoga the Orc. Again, Thieves Guild and Dark Brotherhood are a no-go. I would also say the same for the Arena to some extent, as it is essentially just bloodshed for entertainment, though of course, I'm sure you can massage it a little bit and make it work if you simply must do the Arena questline. Alright, so now you have a really good grasp of the character on both a gameplay level and a role-playing level. It's now time to get in the mid-game leveling. This is where we are going to see the full expression of our build take place. We left off our Crusader build at level 10 with an attribute stat spread of 90 strength, 48 intelligence, 80 willpower, 30 agility, 40 speed, 70 endurance, 50 personality boosted to 75 because of the helm, and 50 luck. At level 11, I brought up my intelligence to 50 with a +2 and invested +5 into strength and willpower. At level 12, I invested again into +5 strength and willpower, with the remainder +2 going into endurance, which brought my totals to, at level 12, 100 strength, 50 intelligence, 90 willpower, 30 agility, 40 speed, 72 endurance, a boosted 75 personality, and 50 luck. Now, this was at the stage where I went ahead to defeat Umaril. I had done all the Mages Guild recommendations and had access to the spellmaking altar at this point. My blade skill was 67, but it would, with the sword focus spell I made, be boosted by 30 points for 30 seconds each time I used it, effectively making it a skill of 97 in terms of actual damage output. In real terms, it took my Sword of the Crusaders raw weapon damage from 14 to 19, meaning over a 30% increase to damage output with the spell. At this stage, I was still training destruction, and so was just using a basic bought weakness to fire on enemies so that they would take even more damage from my enchanted Sword of the Crusader. Though in time, and with more spell making, I would concoct some spells that are much better, such as Burn in Oblivion, which was a target spell that does 20 points of fire damage for 1 second, and 50% weakness to fire on target for 20 seconds, meaning subsequent casts or attacks with the Sword of the Crusader's fire enchantment will do a lot more damage. You can play around and tweak these as you like, but also be sure to remember to give yourself fatigue recovery spells, even ones that fortify fatigue. They are so useful for sustaining good melee combat. I mentioned this one, but I had a spell called Persistence, which fortified fatigue by 100 points for 120 seconds and restored fatigue by 100 points for 2 seconds. But then I also had a spell called Fight On, which restored 100 points of fatigue per second for 4 seconds, essentially restoring our entire bar near instantly. But back to the leveling for a moment. For levels 13 and 14, I would put +5 into willpower, bringing that to 100, but I also started focusing on intelligence as I was really ramping up my magic use, and I wanted a much larger pool now that our warrior-based attributes were high. Also, I started throwing the +2 points into agility because that stat accounts for about a third of your fatigue fatigue pool, as well as its natural regen, but that's not important for us because restoration magic can help us get it back quick. But still, I wanted to bring it up to par, throwing my extra +2s into that stat. When I maxed my willpower at level 14, for level 15 onwards, I would continue investing in intelligence with +5s and putting more +5s into endurance, with the +2s still in agility. However, for 2 of those levels, I would, instead of endurance, throw a +5 into speed twice, bringing it up to 50. By the end of the mid-game, at level 20, our stats should look like 100 strength, though here I have 105 because of the Akatosh blessing, which can be received from one of the Knights of the Nine Ghosts, 90 intelligence, 100 willpower, 48 agility, 50 speed, 90 endurance, 75 personality boosted because of the helmet, and 50 luck. I'll discuss in the endgame section where to go from there, but there are a few crucial points to remember. Firstly, always remember to check that you have the most up-to-date version of the Crusader's Relics, meaning the most powerful versions which you can access by placing them on the rack at the Priory of the Nine Undercroft and then taking them back again. The level thresholds to remember for the mid-game are level 11 to 15 and then 16 to 20, so remember at level 11 and level 16 to make sure that you place them on the stand and get the best version of the Crusader Relics that you can get. The other important thing to consider in this mid-game section is Sigil Stones. At level 17 onwards, you can now get the best versions, the Transcendent Sigil Stones, and they can be used to enchant weapons or armor with predetermined powerful effects. I've discussed this in the previous builds, but you can essentially save scum before picking up a Sigil Stone and continue to reload until you get the desired effect. However, on the flip side, for this character in particular, we are going to close as many Oblivion gates as possible. We are the Crusader. We have to go on Doomslayer tier Crusaders into the Deadlands and show them the wrath of the gods. There is a good chance you will just come across the desired effects. Either way, there are a few desired options, but mostly Fortify Magicka. A Transcendent Sigil Stone will be able to give an enchantment of Fortify Magicka by 50 points. I personally found 2 of these and enchanted a ring and a necklace, respectively named the Crusader's Ring and Crusader's Amulet, which gave me a boost of 100 Magicka total to my character, which I felt was a good addition, giving more access to destruction magic slinging and restoration of both health and fatigue, as well as boosts to skills and attributes. Of course, restoration in itself could also be used to fortify Magicka and intelligence with a spell named Templar's Focus or Sacred Contemplation. You can chain these and get to some exploit tier stacks, but I wanted to focus on the core of the gameplay. You alternatively could go for Sigil Stone enchantments that deliver resistance to magic or fire shield or something like that, but I really think the Magicka boosts are far better, specifically because with our own spells via restoration, we can fortify our attributes, leading to better gameplay gains. I'll explain that better in the endgame section in a moment, but just to cap off the mid-game talk, the final attributes for the level 20 Crusader build were 105 strength, the +5 because of the Akatosh blessing, 90 intelligence, 100 willpower, 48 agility, 50 speed, 90 endurance, 75 personality boosted because of the helmet, and 50 luck. Okay, so now we're hitting the late game, and we can start finishing off our attributes. At level 22, I got my willpower and endurance to 100, and then switched to pumping agility and speed with the remainder into personality. By level 26, I had 105 strength, 100 intelligence, 100 willpower, 70 agility, 72 speed, 100 endurance, 83 personality, and 50 luck. I also maxed my restoration, destruction, blade, block, and heavy armor skills. Getting to 100 in heavy armor feels like such a relief, because now you can move as quickly as if you had no armor at all because it no longer encumbers you. Expert block unlocks a shield bash, and master makes it do even more damage, plus it scales with strength, so it's pretty cool to boost our strength to 200 with restoration magic and then bash demons to death with our shield. There is basically nothing to talk about in regards to gear here, except that you should place the relics on the stand at the Priory of the Nine at level 21, because now you have the final version of the Crusader's Relics. Plus, you've probably found 2 Transcendent Sigil Stones with Fortify Magicka and made the ring and necklace. With these boosts, it brings our total Magicka to 300, and this is before any boosts from restoration spells such as the one I made called Sacred Contemplation that boosts Magicka by 100 points and intelligence by 100 points for 30 seconds each. Speaking of Magicka, let's talk spells, because since we've maxed skills relevant to our build here, there is no longer a reason for these skill buffs that we've been using, like block or blade, etc. So I'm essentially going to give you my hotkey loadout of spells. There are are two main destruction spells that I use for this build in the late game. Firstly, a touch spell called Wrath of the Crusader. It causes 20 points of fire damage and 20 points of shock damage for 3 seconds each. It also applies a weakness to shock, fire, and magic for 100% each, all for 10 seconds. Slam a few of these into the face of an enemy and they'll understand why Pellinal got the name Whitestrake, for his hand is a killing light. The other was a simple target spell of 100% weakness to fire and 100% weakness to magic, each for 20 seconds, which helps the fire damage of our Crusader sword go a lot further. But let's get on to the real fun stuff. Firstly, for pure convenience's sake, excellent for traversal, we have Haste, which fortifies Athletics, one of the few skills that benefits above 100, by 100 points, and also fortifies Speed by 100 points. Sometimes the Crusader has got to cross the map quickly to save the day. These spells are expensive, but they are typically a single buff that needs to be applied before battle. We have Gods Give Me Strength, which fortifies Strength, Endurance, and Health by 100 points each. With the cuirass of the Crusaders Fortify Health of 27 points, this brings our total health pool to 999 for those 30 seconds at level 26. The strength boost will not benefit our weapon damage anymore, but it will increase our carry weight to 1000 and it will increase our shield bash damage significantly. It's fantastic stuff. Alternatively, I also made a spell called Divine Stamina, which fortifies fatigue by 100 points, as well as willpower and agility by 50 points each for 60 seconds. Functionally, this increases our fatigue pool dramatically, as well as our rate of magicka and fatigue regeneration, so I'd usually pop this one first before moving on to Gods Give Me Strength afterward. I've already mentioned Mara's Embrace and Persistence for more health and fatigue, but I do make an Uber version called Gods Save Us, which restores 100 points of health and fatigue for 3 seconds on self. This build is crazy fun with all its buffs, and Restoration has a lot of variety to work into the mix. But ladies and gentlemen, that just about covers it. That was the Crusader build, a divine warrior of righteous extermination. Enjoy. Thank you so much for watching the video, guys. It's been so much fun diving into Oblivion Remastered and all the fantastic changes it's brought to the leveling experience. Subscribe for more Oblivion builds, many more to come. The Nightblade is up next, but check out the polls we run on YouTube's community posts that I'll be posting after the release of each build and have a say in what we make in the future. Thanks again, my name is Scott from Fudge Muppet, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.